Choosing to walk alone is one of the most powerful decisions a person can make. It's a choice rooted in courage, self-respect, and the deep desire to grow beyond the limitations imposed by others. In a world that constantly pushes for belonging, validation, and group acceptance, deciding to travel a path without companions can feel unnatural at first. But in that solitude lies the rare opportunity to strip away distractions, noise, and the expectations of the world. Walking alone forces an individual to meet the most authentic version of themselves. This path is not about isolation or antisocial behavior. It's about discovering what remains when external voices fall silent. It's easy to get lost in the noise, friends' opinions, family expectations, societal norms. But when someone deliberately chooses the lone path, they enter a space where those voices fade and one voice becomes louder than ever, their own. In this silence, clarity is born. It's here that a person begins to think not about what others want from them, but about who they truly are and what they were made to do. When walking alone, every decision becomes your own. There is no one else to blame. There is no distraction to mask fear. You come face to face with your own doubts, your own insecurities, and your own potential. And while that confrontation may be uncomfortable, it is also transformative. Without the influence of others, you learn how to rely on your intuition. You begin to develop a relationship with your inner voice, a voice that has likely been drowned out for years. As that voice grows stronger, so does your identity. You begin to walk differently, think differently, move with more intention, and act with more purpose. There's a certain pressure that comes with group dynamics. People conform, sometimes unknowingly, to the standards and behaviors of those around them. But when someone decides to be alone, that pressure vanishes. What's left is raw truth. Alone, you can no longer hide behind social roles. You're no longer the funny one, the reliable one, or the quiet one. You are simply yourself, stripped of titles and roles, faced with the opportunity to become who you were meant to be without compromise. Growth thrives in solitude because growth requires discomfort, reflection, and time. When you're alone, there's no filter. You can't escape into conversation, into meaningless entertainment, or into someone else's drama. You're left with yourself, and that can be a hard place to stand. But in that place, seeds of greatness are planted. Alone, you begin to examine your habits, your patterns, and your choices. You begin to ask hard questions. Why do I act this way? Why do I think this way? Am I proud of the person I'm becoming? In the absence of distraction, you learn to sit with the truth. And though it may sting, it's the only thing that can lead to real change. Real growth isn't glamorous. It doesn't happen at parties. It doesn't happen in big crowds. It happens late at night when no one is watching. It happens when you choose to get up early and put in the work. It happens when you read instead of scrolling. It happens when you're tired but push through. Alone, you develop habits that others may never understand. But you don't need them to. You're not doing it for applause. You're doing it because you've committed to something bigger than approval. You've committed to becoming the best version of yourself. Strength built in solitude is unshakable. When you've faced your fears in silence, when you've pushed through resistance without witnesses, when you've stood tall without applause, you become bulletproof. You're no longer shaken by criticism because you've already dealt with your worst critic, yourself. You've fought that internal battle and come out on the other side stronger, wiser, more resilient. The world can't take that away from you. No one can give it to you and no one can strip it from you. That strength is earned, and it's earned alone. People often fear solitude because they equate it with loneliness. But there is a world of difference between being alone and being lonely. Being alone is a choice, a space created for peace, self-knowledge, and transformation. Loneliness is the result of disconnection. But when you walk the path of the lone wolf, you are not disconnected. You are reconnected with the deepest parts of your soul. You begin to remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You reclaim your time, your thoughts, your energy. There's also freedom in solitude. When you no longer need to be understood or accepted, you free yourself from the chains of expectation. You can pursue dreams without asking for permission. You can pivot, reinvent, evolve, without having to explain yourself. That kind of freedom creates room for innovation, for creativity, and for powerful forward motion. You are no longer waiting on someone to co-sign your vision. You are your own permission slip. Choosing to walk alone doesn't mean you will always be alone. But the version of you that emerges from solitude is the version ready to lead, to inspire, to endure. It's the version of you that can carry the weight of responsibility, the pressure of criticism, and the silence of the unseen. This version of you doesn't crumble when the crowd leaves because you are never performing for them anyway. You are always moving for something deeper, something internal, something eternal. And perhaps most importantly, solitude teaches you to trust yourself. When you've walked the valley alone, when you've survived the silence, when you've kept moving without applause, you begin to believe in your own strength. That belief can't be taught, and it can't be transferred. It must be earned. And once it's earned, it becomes the foundation upon which you build everything else. You stop looking outward for answers. You begin to look within. You stop chasing opinions. You start listening to your spirit. Solitude is not the absence of connection. It's the birthplace of power. In solitude, you learn to move with purpose. You become intentional. You become sharp. You become focused. You know what matters and what doesn't. You stop wasting time, stop wasting energy, and start operating on a higher frequency. You become the kind of person who leads, not the kind who follows. And that kind of person is rare. That kind of person is dangerous. That kind of person is necessary. The journey of personal growth is often a solitary one. In a world that constantly pushes for connection, validation, and external support, choosing to walk alone can seem counterintuitive, even isolating. Yet for those who dare to embrace solitude, it becomes a forge, a place where strength, resilience, and clarity are born. There is a profound power in walking alone. Not because it is glamorous or easy, but because it demands the development of traits that cannot be cultivated in comfort. It is in solitude that one confronts the rawest parts of oneself, and in doing so, discovers an unshakable inner foundation. Walking alone removes the safety net. It forces one to become entirely self-reliant. When there's no one to catch you, you learn how to stand stronger. You learn to weather the storm without reaching for someone else's umbrella. In this space of self-dependence, courage is built. Every decision must be owned. Every mistake must be faced head-on. There is no one else to blame, no one else to credit. This accountability sharpens character like a blade across stone. The rough edges are smoothed, the weak points revealed and strengthened. Solitude also brings clarity. The noise of the world fades when one walks alone. The opinions, doubts, and expectations of others lose their grip. In their place emerges an inner voice, quiet at first, but growing more confident with time. This voice is authentic, unfiltered, and honest. It tells the truth about who you are, what you want, and what you must do. It's in the silence that real vision is birthed. Not the borrowed dreams of others, but your own, forged from your unique struggles, passions, and experiences. The path of the lone walker is not without suffering. In fact, the suffering is what makes it transformative. There are days when the silence feels unbearable, when the weight of isolation presses down like a stone on the chest. The absence of encouragement or companionship can feel like a void. But those who continue through the pain find that it is not empty. It is a crucible. It is in these moments of darkness that the soul is stretched and strengthened. Each step taken alone becomes an act of defiance against weakness, against fear, against dependence. Strength does not come from always having someone to lean on. It comes from learning how to rise alone. When you fall and there's no one to pull you back up, and yet you rise again, bloodied, bruised, and burning, you prove something to yourself that no amount of praise or support could ever match. You discover the depths of your own capability. You discover that you are not just surviving. You are becoming unbreakable. The lone walk also demands discipline. Without the eyes of others watching, the only thing driving your progress is internal commitment. It tests whether your goals are real or simply for show. In solitude, there is no audience to impress, no applause to chase. The only reward is the growth itself. This forces a kind of discipline that is rare and powerful, a discipline that is not motivated by recognition, but by a burning desire to become more than you were yesterday. It is in this disciplined solitude that mastery is born. Whether in craft, character, or calling, greatness is not built in crowded rooms. It is built in the quiet hours when no one is watching. While others sleep, the lone walker grinds. While others seek shortcuts, the lone walker takes the long road, trusting that the struggle will shape something extraordinary. This is not about ego or proving others wrong. It is about becoming what you were meant to be, stripped of distractions, focused on the mission. There is also a unique freedom in walking alone. Without the constraints of others' expectations or judgments, one can move with authenticity. You are free to think differently, move differently, and build your life in alignment with your own values. This freedom is not without cost. It requires sacrifice, relationships, comfort, and often approval. But what is gained is invaluable: a life of purpose, a mind unchained, and a soul at peace with itself. Over time, solitude shifts from being a burden to being a companion. It becomes a source of energy rather than emptiness. The quiet that once felt oppressive begins to feel like home. In it, you find space to reflect, to plan, and to evolve. And perhaps most importantly, you develop a sense of self so solid that it cannot be shaken by the noise of the world. You no longer seek permission to be great. You no longer wait for someone to validate your dreams. You simply move forward relentlessly, because you know who you are and what you are capable of. This journey is not for everyone. It is hard. It is uncomfortable. But it is worth it. Because in the end, those who choose to walk alone do not remain alone. They attract others who have walked their own paths, who understand the value of independence and inner strength. These are not followers, but fellow warriors. And together they build something greater, not out of need but out of shared purpose and mutual respect. But before that tribe can be found, the lone walk must be embraced, the silence must be faced, the inner demons must be fought. Because only then can true strength emerge. Not the kind built on applause or association, but the kind that stands firm when everything else falls apart. The kind that comes from knowing you have already walked through fire and survived. Choosing to walk alone is often misunderstood. In a world that celebrates collaboration, community, and connection, solitude can be perceived as loneliness or weakness. But solitude, when chosen, not imposed, is a powerful space for transformation. It is in this space of aloneness that clarity sharpens, the noise of the world fades, and the internal voice becomes more distinct and authoritative. The lone wolf, separated from the pack, does not merely survive, it evolves, strengthens, and sharpens its instincts. There is a difference between isolation and intentional solitude. One is a void, the other a forge. When you remove yourself from constant chatter, distractions, and opinions, you begin to cultivate a deeper awareness of who you are. The process is uncomfortable at first. There are doubts, fears, and second-guessing. But discomfort is the precursor to growth. It tests your resolve and calls you to stand on your own convictions. In solitude, there is no one to validate your dreams, no applause for your efforts, no sympathy for your struggle. There is only the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat and the silent echo of your ambition. This solitude becomes the proving ground. Here there are no shortcuts, no false affirmations, no pretense. You are forced to confront the raw version of yourself. You come face to face with your insecurities, your weaknesses, and your fears. But in doing so, you also discover your strength, your tenacity, and your will. The lone journey is not about proving anything to anyone else. It is about revealing everything to yourself. It is about becoming immune to the distractions that keep others stagnant. It is about silencing the doubts that come from outside voices and tuning into the inner wisdom that has always been there. People often cling to the safety of the group, the comfort of agreement, the cushion of collective movement. But progress rarely happens in crowds. The crowd seeks safety, the individual seeks transformation. When you walk alone, you become your own standard. There is no one to pace yourself against. You do not look to the left or right to see if you're ahead or behind. You focus forward. You set your own rhythm, determine your own milestones, and define your own success. It is in the silence of solitude that vision becomes clear. The distractions that clutter the mind fall away. The opinions that once mattered lose their power. There is something deeply liberating about reaching a place where you no longer need approval, where your purpose fuels you more than applause ever could. This is the mindset of the lone wolf, not arrogant but self-assured, not detached but deeply connected to a higher aim. When you walk alone, you learn to solve your own problems. You become resourceful. You stop waiting for help and start becoming the help. You don't make excuses because there is no one to blame. You hold yourself accountable, not out of guilt, but out of purpose. You begin to respect yourself, not for who you are, but for who you are becoming. The strength that grows in solitude is a quiet, steady power. It doesn't shout, it doesn't seek attention, it simply endures. And in a world full of noise, endurance is a rare and invaluable force. Every challenge you face on your own becomes a lesson in resilience. Every setback becomes a training ground. You develop a thick skin, not because you expect life to be easy, but because you know that difficulty is part of the path. When you stand alone, you learn that pain is not the enemy, stagnation is, and that realization shifts everything. You stop avoiding discomfort and start using it as fuel. You welcome the challenge because you know it's making you stronger, sharper, better. The lone journey is not for everyone, and that's why it's so powerful. Most will avoid it. Most will choose the comfort of the crowd. But those who dare to break away find something invaluable. The ability to trust themselves. That kind of trust isn't built through affirmation. It's built through experience. It's built in the dark moments, the late nights, the silent battles that no one sees. It's built when you keep going, not because someone told you to, but because something inside refuses to quit. And the most profound thing about walking alone is what it reveals about your potential. When you remove all external expectations, all social obligations, all borrowed dreams, you are left with something pure, your truth. And from that truth you can build something real. You no longer chase trends. You no longer need to prove anything. You move with purpose, and that purpose becomes your compass. Strength born in solitude isn't just physical or mental, it's spiritual. It's a knowing that doesn't shake even when circumstances do. It's a peace that doesn't break even under pressure. It's a commitment to a vision that no one else needs to see in order for you to pursue it. The lone wolf doesn't wander aimlessly. It follows an internal map that others can't read. And that's what makes the journey sacred. Choosing to walk alone is not a rejection of connection. It's an embrace of self-mastery. It's the understanding that before you can lead, you must learn to follow your own path. Before you can build anything for others, you must first build yourself. And that foundation, built in solitude, is unshakable. It doesn't crumble when critics arrive. It doesn't fade when support disappears. It stands because it was built, in silence, on purpose, with intention. In solitude, you learn that the path is not always lit. Sometimes you walk by faith. Sometimes you take steps without knowing exactly where they lead. But every step teaches you something. Every step builds something. The journey is as important as the destination. And when you arrive, you do so not just with success, but with strength, clarity, and peace.